Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Dr. Ericka Wills, and I'm a professor at the University of Wisconsin School for Workers. And we're joined today by the International President of the United Mine Workers, Cecil Roberts. So thank you, Cecil, so much for joining us and for your time. Cecil's a tough person to intro because his career has really been spectacular. He, as I said, is currently International President of the United Mine Workers, the union that represents the vast majority of coal miners in the United States and on the Navajo Nation, as well as having members in Canada. They also represent members in other employment sectors. Cecil, and correct me if I get any of this wrong, it's off the top of my head. You were born in Cabin Creek, West Virginia, to a family with a long and rich history of union activism, including your great-grandmother,
That's
Bob
true.
Herbert,
Yes,
who was friends and troublemaker with Mother Jones.
correct.
Um, and uh, and Cecil's a Vietnam veteran who worked underground in the coal mines before having the opportunity to step into union leadership above ground, and really took a lead role in the 1989 Pittston strike as international vice president before becoming international president of the mine workers and accomplishing really feats that people considered impossible, such as securing retirement pension and healthcare during a time of mass bankruptcies in the coal industry. Cecil's been a leader in showing the intersection between labor rights, civil rights, and human rights, and ways to engage in mass civil disobedience to create good change. Cecil has a wonderful family, a wife, Carolyn, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren who we're all so happy has allowed him to share his life with us. And I really am proud and honored to call Cecil a friend. So thank you for talking with me today. And what I really want to do is reflect a little bit on your time leadership, the lessons that you've learned and what you see going forward. But I think perhaps the most obvious way to do that would be to start with you explaining a little bit about the picture that is your background right now. Because I know this is one of the stories that I like to tell about the mine workers, and I think it's a fantastic image that encapsulates a lot of who the mine workers are and who you are specifically as well.
Well, thank you very much, Eric. And I appreciate our friendship, by the way. And working with you has been wonderful. And the folks in Wisconsin, we thank you for this opportunity. But that picture is one of my favorites. That's me defying the United States government, the state police in Virginia, the U.S. Marshals, the federal judge and the state judge. Other than that, that's a very peaceful situation. But that took place when we took over the Moss 3 preparation plant during the Pittston strike. This effort drew people from all over the United States to it. We ended up with just about every union in the country represented. This was an unofficial, I guess, convention, you might say. People sleeping on the ground with us for 3.5 days. And we were ordered to cease and desist. The very first day, I was being fined at that time $17,000 a day, I believe. And the judge immediately upped that fine to $50,000 a day for defying his orders. But we didn't leave there until we decided to leave there. And that effort right there is nonviolent. It's another exercise in civil disobedience, which we've been doing all through that strike. And by the way, 4,000 people were arrested during that strike, and almost no one knows that. We were sued by the company in a judgment rendered against us by the state judge of $64 million. That case went to the Supreme Court of the United States, and believe it or not, we won that case before the Supreme Court of the United States, and we didn't pay $64 million to anybody. We had to pay a fine along the way that ended up being around $12 million, but that sounded like peanuts when this was all said and done. And I think people should remember here, this was 1989 and carried over to February of 90, but prior to this, if you go back to when the air traffic controllers were fired by the President of the United States, Reagan, from 1981 up to this point, the labor movement was lagging. And this sparked, I think, the entire labor movement. It showed that you could win a strike and take on everybody, which we had to do. And I think that if I was picking a particular point in time of my career, I think the 89 and 90 strike would be one of the points in my career that I would talk about, because I think everybody benefited from this. There's been a lot of videos of this effort here, and I was just amazed that this wasn't just a strike by the workers. Their families participated in this struggle. Only one person crossed the picket line, and she was a woman coal miner, and she asked if she could come back out and join the strike, and we welcomed her with open arms. They did hire replacement workers, but they quit pretty rapidly. They spent a week there and said, "We've had enough of this." Some of them asked to talk to me, and they wished us well as they left. It's very remarkable. The religious community, civil rights community, and of course the labor movement all came together here to win this struggle. And at the end of this, we secured pensions and health care for the people at Pittston. But we took that another step, and we went straight to Capitol Hill on the momentum created here. And we passed legislation in 1992 that guaranteed the health care of 107,000 of our retirees, something that had never been heard of in the past. So this had a lot of pieces to it. Supreme Court defying the judges, defying the company, and defying everybody that is generally opposed to the labor movement. So we take great pride in what happened here.
Absolutely. And I've had the privilege to be able to visit some of those sites where the Pittston strike happened, and talk to, do oral histories with strikers and leaders of that strike. And one of the things that I found really interesting that I don't think gets talked about enough is not just the strike itself and the strikers, but the Camp Solidarity and
Oh,
the family
absolutely.
and community support. Can you talk a little bit about what Camp Solidarity was?
Oh, yes. Here's what we learned fairly quickly is that a lot of people wanted to visit this area, and a lot of people wanted to bring delegations with them. And the question became, well, how are we going to deal with this many people coming here? So what we did, we secured by a donation of some property that we could use, and put campers there, and pickup trucks and cars, and we worked it out where we fed everybody that came there. And when this was all said and done over the course of a year plus, we think about 40,000 people came through there, and that's somewhat unheard of. And people didn't have to pay for a hotel room. They didn't have to worry about eating if they wanted to come and picket with us, if they wanted to get arrested with us. People actually scheduled days to come down to be. What was a good day for us to be there to get arrested? And delegations from Indiana and Illinois and up into the Northeast. It was just amazing to me. People were so hungry at this time to strike back or take a stronger position or lift up the labor movement. And I was extremely impressed with the solidarity. Camp Solidarity was a great name for this location, because what was happening, people were practicing solidarity at this camp.
Yeah, so this is 1989, 1990. Like you said, this becomes a event that reinvigorates the labor movement coming out of the Patco strike,
Yes.
the air traffic controllers getting fired and union leaders getting arrested and getting banned for life, and the really cooling effect that a president of the United States coming out, breaking a strike, and really giving that sort of impression that companies can follow suit. You changed that narrative and did so with people who wanted to be part of a movement that was so encompassing and was giving working people a voice, and do it being militant, but in a way that involved civil disobedience and mass arrests and for a greater good. And so, I'm going to skip ahead in time a lot because I want to jump to something else that I see as a time where the mine workers used mass mobilization and solidarity, and that would be the pension and healthcare fights. So let's go to like up into towards 2019, and what those fights meant and some of the tools that were used that may be similar.
The fight actually started around 2013. Leading up to 2013, we'd had a number of bankruptcies of coal companies, and every one of those coal companies that had filed for bankruptcy immediately asked to be let out of our multi-employer pension plan and the obligation to provide health care to their retirees. And of course, we all know what happened there. They were granted that, and the contract was turned upside down. And we fought and fought and fought over that. But then, beginning in 2013, this became an absolute nightmare because company after company after company, and these were large employers as opposed to a mid-size or smaller company. And I called for a meeting of all of our local union officers in Charleston, West Virginia, and I told them the truth. I said, dealing with bankruptcy is almost impossible. But the only thing that I know for sure is we're not going to take this lying down, that we're not going to give them our pension plan, because we're talking about bankrupting the entire multi-employer plan that John L. Lewis established with a national strike in 1946, and he bargained that agreement with the President of the United States. And a lot of people don't know that history, but you should learn it. And we fell back on, we were promised this, and we were promised this by the government, and the government should make this right with us. So we went from employer after employer, but then the big one came, and that would have been Peabody Coal Company is still the largest coal company in the world. And they spun off a company they called a Patriot, and they gave Patriot all of their obligations to the pension plan and the healthcare plan, and then they walked away. But we wouldn't let them get away with that. That was legal, but it wasn't just. So we started demonstrating in front of Peabody's offices, Arch's office, which is another big coal company, and Patriot's offices. And we were getting arrested every week. I got arrested 9 times during this fight. And these retirees would ride buses all across the United States and end up in St. Louis for the most part, excuse me, because that's where most of the employers were located. And then we also did demonstrations in Columbus. We put 13,000 people in Columbus, Ohio. We put 10,000 people in Charleston, West Virginia. And if you said we demonstrated in West Virginia, your mouth would fly open right now. But in a heavily Republican red state, we just marched straight from the Civic Center and got arrested in front of Patriots' offices. We did that a couple of times. Then in 2016, we had a massive rally in front of the Capitol in Washington, D.C. And then a miracle happened. And in 2017, Mitch McConnell, who had been bitterly opposed to us, switched. And he realized that he had an election to win. He realized that these retirees were going to Capitol Hill and lobbying on a consistent basis. We're going back to Kentucky and saying Mitch McConnell's not for us. He wanted that narrative changed. And in 2017, our first really great victory was 22,600 retirees who the bankruptcy courts had taken their health care away, were given their health care back by the United States government. So 22,600 people now get their health care from the United States government. And some people said, well, I guess we're going to quit now. And the answer to that is no, we're not, because this is not going to end. We continue to go to Capitol Hill. In 2016, I testified before the Senate Finance Committee, and it was clear to me when I left that committee that we had the majority vote on the Finance Committee, which was another great victory. But in December of 2019, and I would put this right up there with any victory that the labor movement's experienced in the last 50 years, our pension plan was funded by the United States government. Our health care plans were all retirees, not just the 22,600. All of our retirees were guaranteed their health care. Our pension plan would have been bankrupt in around 2023. We've received about $3 to $4 billion from the United States government. I know many people know about the pension success we had a year or so later by everybody, but this was the first in this fight. And this was a fight that started in 2013, and 6 years later, a total victory for the people who were retired under United Mine Workers Health and Pension Plan. And we're extremely proud about that. But it wasn't me that did this. I tell everybody that this is not a me union we have here. This is a we union. We're all in this together. Any success we have, it comes from the bottom up. And what we do is, in the position that I'm in, is provide the leadership to see that this happens and that the people have a way to fight. We had the most effective lobbying effort, I believe, that's ever been seen on Capitol Hill. Everybody wore the same shirt. It's a camo shirt that says we are one on the front and we are everywhere on the back, and that was true. And I tell people this, these coal miners, these retirees in these $8 shirts out lobbied those people on K Street in $5,000 suits. And there's not many senators that won't agree with that, Republican or Democrat. I've had them both Republicans, Democrats, liberals, and conservatives tell me that was the most effective lobbying effort they've ever seen. I think there's a lesson right there that we can take it to heart and maybe practice that as we move forward in all these fights that we seem to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the mass solidarity and support and the voices of workers and people who are impacted themselves, going to Capitol Hill, writing letters, showing up, engaging in civil disobedience. This is an arc that we see throughout this time as successful tactics. And there's really two things going from, Pittston to the pension healthcare fights to the present, coming out of the struggles that have happened over the last couple of years that I want to talk about. One is the changing context of ownership, specifically in coal with the bankruptcy process and investment and restructuring of coal companies through private equity and Wall Street funds, the way that has impacted both the coal companies that come out of that, the way they function, and how unions have to address that new structure. And the second one is this theme, really the importance of healthcare and of addressing worker health and safety. So let's start with that first one with Wall Street. Through these bankruptcy processes, through employers trying to get out of obligations for their workers and dissolving the collective bargaining agreement. What do we see as sort of lessons going forward in dealing with Wall Street ownership and how unions can fight back against that?
Well, I do believe that there's work to be done on how we deal with this. Let me explain the difference here between what we had been experiencing to what happened in Alabama here. almost to in every one of these bankruptcies that we had dealt with previously until we got to Alabama was happened something like this. Either the company that filed for bankruptcy filed in Chapter 11 to go back into business under with a different structure for, let's assume for a minute, they terminate the contract, they keep the workers, but the workers have a contract that's not near as good as what they had before the bankruptcy was filed. Or another company comes in and they buy this company out of bankruptcy, and that company happens to be a coal company that's already in business somewhere. This was different in Alabama. Jim Walter's Resources owned the mines that we eventually ended up on strike. And Jim Walter's Resources, yes, that's the same company that built the houses and sold the houses for years, but they owned these coal mines in Alabama. And when they filed bankruptcy, this became a totally different animal here. And this company was sold out of bankruptcy to an entity that didn't exist. It's really hard to fight with somebody that doesn't exist, right? So you had this, what I would call conglomerate or different investment groups from Wall Street form this entity. And they said, well, here's the deal, Union. We don't have to recognize you, which is a thing that happens in bankruptcy. People don't realize this if they haven't dealt with it. They do not have to hire anybody back. These words free and clear should make everybody shudder, because that's what happens in bankruptcy. That means that anything you had previously, you're not going to have unless you can figure out how to deal with it. So as we watched this happening, we had a rally before anybody actually owned it. We had a rally in a park in Alabama, and we did what we do a lot of times. We boldly said, we don't know who's going to buy this place or who's going to own it, but there's damn sure not going to be anybody work up at that mine but the people from the United Mine Workers who had those jobs at the end of the day. Because if you go into these fights and, well, I'm going to win this in the court, forget it. That's not going to happen. This is horrendous, by the way. So you had these investors come in, and I don't remember all their names, just to be honest about it. They first purchased this company, and then they said, well, we'll bargain with you, but we are not under any obligation to do that. We'll just see where this goes. At the end of the day, this first investor from Wall Street, by the way, it's where they came from, Wall Street. They said, we'll hire all your people back, but you need to make concessions. Our workers over a 5-year period gave $1 billion with a B, concessions. They refused to pay the retirees their health care, but we picked them up through the legislation that ultimately became law. And then the next thing is, they said, well, we'll see 5 years down the road, we'll be on our feet, and you can bargain all these things back. That didn't happen. For 5 years, these people worked with the worst contract that we have with anybody in the coal fields. And we're thinking, we've got to go back here and pick up this $5 billion, or excuse me, this $1 billion over 5 years that we gave these folks. However, that didn't happen because the first investment group from Wall Street sold out and took about $500 million back to Wall Street with them and passed it out to the investors. Here comes another group from Wall Street, and we're assuming that logic would have that would dictate this, that there's some progress can be made on behalf of the workers. From the very first day we sat down with these people, bargaining with them, they said, you got $1, and we'll give you $1.50 over 5 years. Now, you can calculate this if you want to. That doesn't even come close to touching $1 billion of concessions that these workers made. The workers were not willing at all to continue working under those circumstances. So we did the thing that we thought we had to do. And look, no one has to tell me how risky it is to go on strike in the South. If you're picking a place in the South to strike, don't strike in Alabama because there's nobody down there for you. Okay, there's nobody going to be on your side in Alabama. But we thought we've taken on some big fights here, and we've been able to win those fights. So we took this one on, and we went 2 years, probably close to $40 million in strike benefits, and including health care we paid to these workers. But the strike, the number of people on strike continued to dwindle. People went and found jobs there's 2 union mines other than this one down there. They found work there. Some people found work in other industries. At the end of the day, we didn't have any other options but to end the strike. But this is not striking a coal company. This is saying, I'm going to take on Wall Street, and I'm going to make Wall Street give back to us what we lost. And we've got to figure out some way, some strategy here. But what we did, and I think was highly successful, we had couple rallies right there on Wall Street. We went to see them. They didn't come to see us. We picketed every day in front of these investors' buildings. We raised all the stink that you could possibly raise in New York City, and people will never forget those coal miners being there because they never seen anything like that. We got a lot of help from the labor movement in New York. This takes solidarity to win any of these fights. You can't win these fights by yourself. You got to have a lot of help. And by the way, I want to applaud the rest of the labor movement here for a second. The rest of the labor movement, the people I sat beside and have sat beside over the last 20 years or so of my career at the executive council level, they donated $3 million out of their treasury to help support this strike. Every dime of that, by the way, went to the workers. We didn't keep any of that in our treasury. We gave it all to the strikers trying to have a victory here. But we haven't quit. We're still fighting, and we've been a real pain with this company where you're met, and they do have a name now. That's a good thing, and we've given it our all, and we're going to continue to fight till we have justice for these workers.
Yeah, thank you. I think that it's so important for people to realize that, we started with talking about Pittston, but to go all the way through the Warrior Met strike, to understand the way that the United Mine Workers are still on the front line, not only for their members, but for the battles that are facing the labor movement and working people as a whole today and will be increasingly in the future. So from reinvigorating the labor movement with the Pittston strike to taking on Wall Street, which more and more unions are going to have to do. And as a labor movement, we need to figure out a way forward to be able to engage in those kind of fights. That the mine workers are still at the forefront of doing that. So we have about 2 minutes left. The half an hour always goes really quick, but I want to ask you in that last minute, 2 minutes that we have, to share real quickly about the silica dust rule. I know that there was a rally yesterday and the importance of having a safe level for worker health and safety.
Yeah, our rally yesterday was we were supporting our brothers and sisters in the Black Lung movement, and there isn't organizations all over the coal fields called the Black Lungs in the state level. There's a national Black Lung organization. These are people who are suffering from pneumoconiosis or Black Lung themselves, dragging their oxygen bottles behind them. They're fighting for their benefits that are never sufficient to keep them alive. But what yesterday's rally was about is trying to prevent increased cases of Black Lung caused primarily by silica. There's 3 locations in the United States of America where this has been heavily prevalent. That's in southern West Virginia, eastern Kentucky, and southwest Virginia. And those areas are basically where I'm from. And there's been increased numbers of young men and young miners, anywhere from 25 to 45, with severe cases of Black Lung because silica is making its way into their lungs. When you get the most advanced case of Black Lung caused by the silica, you've got about 3 years to live, and you're going to be dead. I don't care if you're 25 or 45 or 55. That's about how long you have to live. There's only one way to treat this and save your life, and that's a lung transplant. This silica rule was passed in 2024, and with the new administration coming in, that's gotten held up. Now it's in the courts. We were part of the legal litigation ongoing. There was a move made to kick us off the effort of trying to convince the courts to provide the assistance and in a way of ordering the government to comply with the initial law, rule that was passed in 2024. That didn't happen. That's why we're standing in front of the Department of Labor yesterday, raising a lot of hell with the people in power. What we're saying here as a government is we don't care if these miners get sick. We don't care if they die. We're not changing our minds. And that's really digging in. And there's been about 160,000 coal miners die from pneumoconiosis in the last 75, 80 years. And now to see this coming back in the form it was in before the passage of the 1969 Coal Mine Health and Safety Act. One last thing I'd like to say, and I think I should thank the entire labor movement for this. I had a friend of mine do some math on this. $35 billion has flowed into the coalfield communities since the Pittston strike because of the United Mine Workers. I don't know if there's any employer in the entire coal industry that can say that. And that goes right into the hands of these sick people, these elderly people. And I'm so proud of that victory. And I'm so proud that labor solidarity helped do that.
Thank you so much for sharing those stories, sharing your experience, sharing your wealth of knowledge, and really being the leader for not only the United Mine Workers, but the U.S. labor movement that you are. I am glad that you could join us today, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon.
Oh, thank you, Ericka. I appreciate this.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.